30 years ago, when I was a young teenager in West Tennessee, I frequented the woods to go hunting after school and on the weekends. On one such weekend, my father and older brother set up a deer stand in a large uninhabited forest near our home. The stand had a ladder and a sitting area on the top. It was set several hundred yards into the woods, and it was 12 feet off the ground. On a cold and quiet November morning, I was in the stand with my .270 rifle, waiting for that big buck to come through. I'd gotten to the deer stand early that morning, and after a couple of hours of sitting in the dark, daylight finally made its appearance. I started to hear lumbering, bipedal footsteps coming from my left side, crunching and snapping the leaves as they went forward. It couldn't have been a deer because even the most heavy-footed buck still sounded like a squirrel on the ground to me, if that made any noise at all. But this sound was different. So many things started crossing my mind about what it could be. I knew it wasn't a deer, and it was unlikely that it was another hunter because no one lived nearby. Even then, the footsteps were far too heavy to be a human. I thought maybe someone's cow got loose and was wandering through the woods, but there were no cows in the nearby area, and certainly none that walked on 2 feet. Whatever it was, it had my full attention. The footsteps were so heavy that I was sure I would see whatever it was because the woods weren't very dense. All the leaves had fallen to the ground by that point in the season, and I could easily see 60 yards through the trees. The footsteps stopped occasionally, as if they were checking out the surroundings and smelling the air, and then they continued toward me. This happened several times until they were, I guessed, 15 yards from me. I was on the edge, to say the least. I had my weapon ready, but I never took off the safety, and I never pointed it at anything because there was nothing to point at. I scanned the area in the state of confusion because I was clearly hearing these footsteps, but there was absolutely no living thing to be seen anywhere around me. It was moving invisibly through the woods without disturbing a single twig or branch. I didn't know what else to do but sit there and be still and be as quiet as I could until it was gone. At one point, it must have seen or smelled me because I heard it turn around and move in the opposite direction. And when the sound of its footsteps faded to nothing, I exited the deer stand and I went back home, and I looked over my shoulder the whole way back. The incident left me baffled. There was simply no way that I would not have been able to see this creature. I've heard other stories of similar experiences people have had about hearing something close by but never seeing it, and recently I heard of the concept that Bigfoot have cloaking abilities. I have never experienced anything like that again, nor do I want to. Maybe it saw my weapon and decided to go in another direction. Maybe it was a cloaked Bigfoot or something else paranormal. No matter what it was, I couldn't see it, though I'm sure it could see me. That's enough to make a young teenager think twice about going into the woods again. Thank you for the work that you do on these podcasts. You're welcome. Sharing all these people's experiences has helped many of us realize that strange occurrences are more frequent than one might assume. Yes, that is true to the writer. He didn't say I don't think he said to say his name, so I won't. But if he hears this, he knows who it is. That is true. People, not just by, the evidence or the fact that I get so many emails is that strange things happen out in the woods. But this is a small podcast, and, we get hundreds of letters from people describing every kind of weird thing you can imagine. But just imagine all the people who actually do experience it, who've never heard this podcast. They don't send them in. The numbers must be huge, and it makes you wonder what's going on out in the woods. I've never experienced anything really weird. There has been something going on lately here around. Y'all know I don't really show it much anymore about me taking my dogs walking every morning around a path that we have in my property and my neighbor's property. And it's just a good, relaxing time for me. I ride my bike or I walk or whatever, and it's quiet, especially this time of year. It's so quiet in the fall. The bugs are quiet, and I don't know, it's just real peaceful out there, and the sun's coming up. It's so pretty. But this thing's been happening, and it's never happened before. I did have 5 dogs. I've only got 3 now, and there's one that stays home. She never goes walking with us. She's my little pug. She's she's Her Highness. She thinks she doesn't have to exercise, and so she doesn't. But I've got 2 dogs that usually go with me, and normally they know our route. They're way ahead of me, sometimes where I can't even see them, or they get hung up on a smell behind me and I get way ahead of them. So half the time I'm riding or walking that route, I never know where they are. They're out in the woods sniffing, and you know what dogs do. But the last couple of weeks, there's been 2 days where we get to my neighbor's property and we're about to go on his property, and they just stop and they will not go any further. And they've never done that. And I get frustrated with them. I'll get 100 yards ahead of them. I can see them maybe down a levee or down a straight path. And I'll start whistling at them and calling to them to come on, and they just stand there and look at me, and they won't come. They won't do it. And so I don't want to leave them. If these dogs follow me everywhere, but if I left them, I don't know where they would go. They might wander off in the woods, and I don't want them to do that. So I want them to keep them close where I can keep an eye on them and call them back when they run off. But so I go back and we just go home. They don't want to do it. It's happened twice. I have no idea what that's all about. We have had some I want to call them wild dogs or stray dogs. And this county is full of stray dogs. And we're lucky that we don't get too many come up on this property. But when they do, they usually kill a couple of chickens, and most of the time when we're not here, sometimes we come back, we'll have lost 8 or 9 chickens. They're just laying out in the yard dead. Matter of fact, that happened about 3 weeks ago. We think we lost 6 or 8. We had our flock up to about 30 or 35 birds, and we're now down to maybe 25, 28 birds. And we've just lost a lot of chickens. And then the other day, I was sitting in here working, and I saw this flash. I had my door open. I saw this flash go by the front of my little recording working shack out here. And I jump outside, and there's this big old muscled up tan-colored pit bull chasing my chickens. He was trying to kill them. I keep a shotgun right next to the door, and I raised it up. I shot behind him. I had the bead on him. My instinct was to shoot him, but I just can't shoot a dog unless they need to be shot. And this dog had a collar on. I didn't want to kill somebody's dog, but I did want to run him off, so I shot. And I may have peppered his butt just a little bit with some gravel. I didn't hit him with any shot, but I made sure that he knew that this was not a good place to be. And he ran around the house, and I've never seen him again. I don't know where he went. I don't know what was happening, but man, that was a big it's like one of those big pit bull, muscled up, bodybuilded dogs you see in these pictures on the internet. I kind of wonder if these dogs are not marking out there, or coyotes maybe, and my dogs aren't wanting to cross that barrier. Normally they want to. They kind of claim that area as their own. That's a long story to say. There are weird things that happen in the woods, and they don't really happen to me. I've never had anything really strange. I've always enjoyed being in nature and looking at the wildlife and just being in a peaceful place. Sometimes I'll take a lawn chair and just walk right out in the middle of the woods and sit down, and I'll just sit there and read a book. It's the most peaceful. If you have any woods near you, you ought to try that. Pick up a book, take you a light lawn chair, just walk out in the middle of the woods, find you a log or a stump to prop your feet up on and kick back and read a book for a couple hours. You will love it. If you like peace and solitude, it's really something fun to do. All right, how about we go to another story? Thanks for listening to my yakking. All right. Thank you for clicking on the video. We got five. Not 5, not 555, just 5 Bigfoot stories in this podcast. I really hope you like it. Most people like the Bigfoot stories. I get it. So I made sure and found 5 Bigfoot stories for this podcast, just for the Bigfoot people. And I appreciate you clicking on the video. Now y'all ready for some stories? All right, here we go. I'm from Southend in the UK, which is about 35 miles east of London. 10 years ago, when I was 17, my sister, our friend, and I went out for a walk one evening. We ended up on a new road that had only been open for maybe a year. It was in the middle of a farmer's field and near an old World War II bunker. They were round, reinforced concrete buildings that were dotted all around southeast England and were used as lookouts for German aircraft. This bunker hadn't been used since the war. One of the doorways had been blocked up with dirt and overgrown with plants. And just behind it was a long dirt footpath with trees hugging both sides. When we got to the bunker, our friend Matt went inside to explore it. My sister and I stayed on the path, and we joked with him that he shouldn't get scared. "Don't get scared," we said. But just as we started to tease him, we heard a noise coming from the trees to our right. When we turned to look, we saw what I can only describe as a thing. It had two large red eyes, at least 7 feet high, and it crashed through the trees toward us like a derailed train. I couldn't call it a monster, and I can't call it a human because all we saw were the eyes. My sister and I ran for our lives, shouting at Matt as we went to get the hell out of there. And when we made it back to the road in the field again, my sister and I stopped to catch our breath. We looked worriedly back toward the wooded area, but Matt still hadn't come out, and we were both bouncing on our toes and pacing restlessly, half expecting to hear him scream or cry for help, and half expecting to see the eyes chase after us again. After the longest 5 seconds of my life, we saw Matt sprinting out of the wooded area, and when he got to us, we ran the rest of the way home, looking over our shoulders the whole way. I'm not sure if this is connected at all, but something strange happened 2 weeks later. I had gotten up from a deep sleep in the middle of the night to get some water, and when I looked out my window, I saw a bright glowing light hovering 20 feet from the ground. I watched it for an entire minute as it floated motionlessly, and then in the blink of an eye, it shot up into the air and it was gone. Out of caution, I looked in the direction of the bunker, sort of expecting to see the glow of the red eyes again. Thankfully, I didn't see anything but the darkness of the woods. I couldn't get over the coincidence, though. What are the chances of two strange events like this happening in the same area just 2 weeks apart? Maybe the light was looking for the creature, or maybe it wasn't related at all. Either way, I started locking my windows after that. Stay safe in this weird time. Oh man, what a good story. Thank you for that story from England. 35 miles east of London. Wow, that's pretty cool. Was it a UFO? Was it a Bigfoot? Was it some kind of demon? I don't know. You never know on these things. But this was really good. I love these stories from the UK. Certainly appreciate the writer sending it. Okay, here's an email about the Alabama white thing. My wife and I bought property in Coleman, Alabama a few years ago, and not long after moving in, we heard a story about a sighting of the Alabama white thing. My wife was talking to someone at the beauty shop, and they told her about a sighting that occurred only a mile from where she lived. According to the story, 10 years earlier, a young man was visiting his folks who lived down the road. When he left to go home, he witnessed a large white animal running across the field on all fours. The animal stood up at the edge of the field, stepped over a barbed wire fence, and walked into the woods on 2 feet. After hearing this story, my wife asked me about Bigfoot and whether or not I believed in it and if I thought the creature was still lurking in the area. Well, I was honest, and I told her I had seen so many unusual things that I did not discount the possibility that some sort of humanoid throwback existed. And I also told her I had no idea if the creature was still in the area, but I thought it was unlikely. What she didn't know is that I have a number of friends who say they have witnessed Bigfoot-type creatures. One in particular was witnessed by 4 separate people at the same time in Blount County, just 30 miles from where we live. According to the story, the group was hunting in the woods on a mountain. It was late at night, and the dogs were out ahead of the group chasing raccoons. They were following a creek bed when all of a sudden the dogs came running past the hunters, yelping with their tails tucked low. My friend said that they rounded a corner in a creek when a large, hair-covered creature stood up and ran across the water and up a steep bank. The creature used its hands to grab roots and tree branches to climb out and then disappeared into the darkness. Now, I was not a stranger to these tales, but my wife had never even thought about such things until she learned about the white thing. When her curiosity grew, I eventually told her the various sightings I had been aware of around the area over the years. Well, not long after that, in December of 2023, she came home again with yet another story about the white thing. This time it was a more recent story. And in this story, a coworker said that one night they heard a ruckus in the woods behind their house. The noise was a mix between a baby crying and a woman screaming bloody murder. Days later, the same people said that they went out at the break of day to carry out the garbage or something like that when they saw a large white-haired creature walk behind their barn and disappear into the woods. I have come to believe that these creatures lurk much closer to civilization than most people realize. Since many of these stories happen right where I live, I've taken up an interest in cryptids, and I'm looking for a group of like-minded people who are willing to share stories and information. To any of your listeners who live in Alabama and have heard about the white thing, be careful out there, you are not alone. I hope you find a group in Alabama to kind of settle your curiosity and your newfound enthusiasm to look for cryptids. I know my friend Cat Rabbit has a little group that they get together, and Lanita Bryant, claims she has Bigfoot come on her property all the time. You could probably look them up on Facebook. I'm trying to think of the name of Cat Rabbit's group. Maybe it's Alabama Bigfoot Hunters or something like that. But if the writer will email me, I'll connect you with them. But this white thing, this white thing, Alabama white thing phenomenon is coming up more and more. And I don't know if it was because I've, come across a few stories and read them on the podcast, but it's almost like there's two or three, there's three that come to mind. Number one, the stories that recur a lot is the Jersey Giant in the Pine Barrens of the northeastern United States. I think they're in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. I don't know. And then there is the Mogollon. I know it's Mogollon, but I call it Mogollon because the L is a L. It's not silent. It is in Spanish, but not in English. So I call it the Mogollon Monster out in Arizona. Got tons of stories of that. The Jersey Giant. And then Momo in Missouri, the Missouri Momo Monster, which is a Bigfoot. I bet I've gotten a dozen of those. So you got the Jersey Giant, the Alabama, and now we have the Alabama white thing. So you got the Jersey Giant, the Mogollon Monster, Momo in Missouri, and now the white thing. And these are local tales about creatures that creep around in the woods, and people see them all the time. I mean, I've gotten tons of emails on all these, and it really is an interesting phenomenon. So thank you to the writer for this email. It was really good. I enjoyed it. Thank you. All right, this is a Mississippi story. This is a good one. One time in Mississippi, I was on my way to work on a billboard. To get there, I had to drive on a hidden road with 3 houses on it. 2 of the houses were abandoned, but an old man lived in the third one. Both of the abandoned houses had cars and trucks and even campers parked out front. Everything looked like it was just left behind. As I was heading to the end of the road, the old man came out and we got to talking, and he asked if I believed in Sasquatch, and I told him, yeah, I believe in him. That's when he told me about the 2 other houses. A couple and their children moved into one of the houses, and for about 2 years, the old man would hear gunshots from their direction in the middle of the night. He said gunfire out there is normal since they're in the woods and have black bears to deal with, so he didn't think about it too much. But one day he was going down the road when the neighbor man walked out and stopped him. He asked him if he had seen something creeping around his house in the middle of the night and beating on his house. Well, the old man told him no, but said that there were lots of critters out there that would do such a thing. The neighbor asked him if the critters that he was talking about were 8 or 9 feet tall with hair all over them, and the man was honest, and he said, yes, there are what people call Bigfoot living in these woods, but to just ignore them, and if they come around, shoot once or twice in their direction, and they should leave you alone. 2 weeks later, the old man was woken up in the middle of the night by multiple gunshots, and he heard something screaming louder than anything he had ever heard. The next afternoon, when he was heading to the store, he noticed a moving truck in front of his neighbor's house. And as he drove by, the guy stopped him again and he said, "Hey, old-timer, I'm leaving this place." Well, the old man asked what had happened and said that he had heard the gunshots the night before. And the neighbor said that in the middle of the night, something was beating on the house again, but this time it was worse than ever. He said that not only was the creature beating on the house, but it was also trying to open the door. And the neighbor shot at the door, but it only made things worse. And the creature started ripping the siding off the back of the house, and it was shattering the windows. He fired more shots toward the thing, and everything got silent. And then all of a sudden, a tree slammed into the back of the house. And the neighbor said that he had had enough, and he and his wife were leaving. He said he and his brothers would come back another time to pack everything and move out. 2 weeks after that, the people who lived in the other house left too. That was 3 or 4 years ago, but no one had ever come back to get their stuff. The old man told me to keep my eyes open while I was working and to make sure that I was out of there before dark, because that's when things started happening. I told him I had my own experience once, and I asked him if he minded if I came out one evening to investigate. He told me that I could come back anytime I wanted as long as I called him first, so he was expecting me and to come before dark so we wouldn't accidentally get shot. He said if I do come back, to come back with a big gun. He said the creatures have been in the area for years, but they usually don't bother anyone. But once in a great while, he'll hear the screams and chatter coming from the woods, but for the most part, they leave him alone. He has lived in this house most of his life, and his father and mother before him. His son comes to visit on occasion, but never stays overnight or after dark. Now, I'm not going to lie. I got the creeps being out there, and I haven't been back yet, but I definitely will, and I'll keep you posted as to what I find or what happens. And when I go, I'll go with my .44 Magnum and my rifle, and I will not go alone. I guarantee you that. Oh, man. That, good grief. You could write, that's like a 2-hour story. Wouldn't you love to find these people who have had these experiences and just sit down and, I don't know, that's the way I think, just record what they say and, get the vibe from them or try to get the mood or see if you could hear or see the fear in them. I don't know. That might be too invasive, but if they were willing to talk, I'd love to talk to them. Of course, they're gone. They hadn't even come back to get their stuff, so I bet you they're not interested in even talking about it. They just want to put it behind them. But apparently in Mississippi, the Bigfoots will attack a house and tear siding off of it and push trees over on it and try to open the door and scare people off. That's terrifying. That is terrifying. And I live in Mississippi. Holy crap. Anyway, I've never had an experience like that, but that is interesting. Okay, thanks for the writer for sending this. It was a great story. I really appreciate it. Okay, I've got a minute to do one more. Let's squeeze in one more story before we quit this podcast. The writer says, I've been meaning to write this for a while now, but I always talk myself out of it or find something to stare at on TV. I didn't see anything or smell anything, but I had something really strange happen to me while squirrel hunting one day. It's kind of dull, but it's 100% true. I live in northwest Arkansas, and from 2003 to 2009, I lived up in the woods on the southern edge of the Boston Mountains, which are the foothills of the Ozarks. There are thousands and thousands of acres of national forest lands and some pretty rough country with steep mountainsides and deep, dark hollers. For folks who don't know what a holler is, it is a small, narrow mountain valley akin to a ravine. Most of the time, a holler is pretty steep on the sides and it's hard to get down into, completely inaccessible to wheeled vehicles. There was such a holler as this on the backside of the property where I lived. It was steep and deep and dark with giant limestone boulders on the sides of where it started descending from the top of the property. I used to hunt a lot, and I loved just going into the woods by myself. I hunted on one side of the holler, which gave me a good view of the opposite hillside where the boulders were scattered out. It was one of my favorite spots, but every time I hunted on that side of the holler with the boulders, I had an uneasy feeling. It was weird and hard to explain. I just wasn't comfortable around those giant boulders when I was alone. In 2006, I was squirrel hunting one morning in the early winter on the boulder side of the holler. I was on the fringe of that area that made me feel uneasy, and as I was getting deeper into that area, I began feeling like something or someone was watching me. I crept slowly through the hardwoods and stopped often to look for squirrels and check my surroundings. There was one area toward the top of the holler that I was drawn to and I kept looking at, but even though I didn't see anything unusual, it still felt like something was watching me from that direction. But there was nothing I could do about it though, so I blew it off and I kept going. The game trail that I was on angled down and away from the top of the hill. I had used it many times, and it was easy walking. As I got deeper into the woods and closer to the area where I felt the eyes, I noticed something lying in the trail ahead of me. I thought it was a piece of trash carried in by some critter, so I kept going, and when I reached it, I was pretty stunned to find two possum skeletons laying parallel to each other, only inches apart right in the middle of the trail. Both skeletons had the skulls attached and had a patch of fur still attached back toward the hips. Neither had front legs and both had a few ribs still attached, but most of them were broken and incomplete. The bone was bleached white, and the small piece of hide holding the hair was dry and stiff on the hip of both skeletons. It was just weird. The only way those skeletons could have gotten there and been so deliberately displayed was if something laid them there for me to find. There were a lot of coyotes and raccoons and possums and bobcats and everything else around there, so I know these two possums didn't die a natural death and end up on the trail by coincidence. My gut told me why they were there and who put them there and why I felt like I was being watched. As I stood there dazed and confused, I tried to decide what to do. I knew no one was going to believe me, so I picked the skeletons up and I took them home with me. You can believe that when I left those woods, I left a lot faster than I went in that day. Wow, that would be weird to walk up on a trail and find two possums or any animal skeletons laying side by side like they had been laid there. This writer's right. I guess they could have got shot there. One bullet, two kills. I don't know. I always try to be the devil's advocate and try to figure out ways that things could happen that would explain it. That you wouldn't blame everything on Bigfoot, which is what a lot of people who believe in Bigfoot do. Anything they see in the woods, oh, Bigfoot did that. Bigfoot did this. See that trail over there? Bigfoot did that. See that little branch broken? Bigfoot did that. See that little depression in the woods? Bigfoot did that. But this is one of those things that's like, I don't know. I mean, it could have been a human. It could have been a person with a very weird sense of humor. They could have had a trail camera on you just to see how you reacted. You never know. But if there was none of that, and this really was just kind of a random two possum skeletons together, and you know what's saddest of all is I love possums. They're so sweet. My little, my little granddaughters someone gave them a baby possum. The mama had been run over, and the baby possum survived. I don't know how, because the babies usually are attached to the possum's back, but she had been hit. She wasn't dead. The mama wasn't dead, but they picked up the mama and the babies. The mama eventually died or never recovered, and so they kind of unalived it, which was a merciful thing to do. And my granddaughters got one of the babies, and they are so sweet. Now, they're wild. They're not meant to be pets. They're not a domestic animal or domesticated animal, but you can habituate them and get them used to you, and they'll crawl around on you, and the males get really big. They get big old heads on them and stuff, but it would be interesting. But anyway, back to the story. It's kind of sad that there were two possums there. Anyway, I love the story. It's kind of mysterious and creepy, and I thought it was great. So didn't mean to talk your ear off, but I was on a roll. Thanks to the writer. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you. If you thought this podcast was good, just reach down there and just mash that little thumbs up button. And if you feel so inclined, leave me a comment. Don't leave me a nasty one. There's no need for that. If you ain't got something nice to say, don't say it. But leave a comment if you thought the video was any good. And maybe you could share it with your friends. I like growing this channel. It's kind of fun. I'd do it anyway if the channel never grew, because I love doing these stories. But it is kind of fun that the channel's grown a little bit, and I really appreciate y'all. So we will see you on the next podcast. I appreciate you. Thank you very much.